Thanks for watching the Daily Debate Live Wednesday with Taghreed Hussein here on Nile TV International. Tonight we'll be talking about the partnership and the sense for growth and sustainable development in Africa. Last Thursday, 6 new countries from Africa, South America and Western Asia were invited in South Africa in order to join the BRICS, hence marking an historic and a new starting point for the BRICS cooperation. South Africa's endearing nickname, known as the Rainbow Nation, attests to the rich tapestry of cultures, of languages, and also of traditions that have been woven together. And this sense of their being woven, definitely they are woven in a harmonious way and mosaic. Much of the way the vibrant nation is manifesting itself, the BRICS is today presenting a changing and an enjoyable mixture and a sense of partnership, of cultures, of languages, of growth path that would make a strong African flavor. With bringing cultures and civilizations together from around the whole world, South Africa have managed to create what we call the Rainbow BRICS, in order to further enrich this already fantastic fabric. Tonight, along with our very distinctive guest, Professor Dr. Amany Asfour, President of the Africa Business Council, we're going to talk further about this future sense of cooperation between Africa and the BRICS, and also we'll be talking how the 6 new members will actually help deepen this sense of cooperation and that has been woven and accomplishments of the BRICS over the past years. Dr. Asfour, thank you so much for coming to Nile TV.
My pleasure.
Thank you, dear. And we'll be discussing all about the opportunities for the potential cooperation between the private sectors in the BRICS and the African countries. Definitely Egypt's membership, accession as a member of the BRICS, how it is very important and how it is a step towards attracting further investments of the BRICS countries also to Egypt. We'll know more about this important topic, but first let's see the report and we'll be back.
This year's BRICS Summit has taken on a distinctly African flavor with an emphasis on strengthening BRICS-Africa cooperation. At the recently concluded BRICS Summit that took place in Johannesburg, August 22nd to the 24th, 2023, 6 additional countries were admitted: Egypt, Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Argentina and Ethiopia, beginning in January 2024. In his address in the lead-up to South Africa hosting the 15th BRICS Summit, President Cyril Ramaphosa stated South Africa has always championed the interests of Africa within BRICS, and in this regard, we want to build a partnership between BRICS and Africa so that our continent can unlock opportunities for increased trade, investment and infrastructure development. President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said that Egypt was looking forward to working with the rest of the BRICS Plus group to achieve its goals towards strengthening economic cooperation among the member countries and raising the voice of the Global South on a global scale. According to President of Brazil, Inácio Lula da Silva, with this new BRICS Plus, the representative of the global admission of the new members will be of global GDP from 32% to 37% on a purchasing power parity basis. One of Africa's potential gains from joining BRICS is diversifying partnerships and alliances with countries or regional blocs that BRICS presents. This could lead to more economic, political and security relations. Stronger regional cooperation and integration between BRICS and Africa could lead to unifying efforts to address common challenges such as security, infrastructure development and economic growth. Such regional cooperation offers more fertile ground for the African Continental Free Trade Area to thrive. BRICS countries can enhance the way African countries are financing their infrastructure. In this regard, Africa is looking ahead for the potential of intra-BRICS investment, as more collaboration and investments are key drivers of economic cooperation, aiming to bring more benefits for sustainable and inclusive economic development.
Well, as we have seen earlier in the summit, the South African President Ramaphosa had announced at a press conference that the 15th BRICS summit at the membership of Egypt, Argentina, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates will be taking effect January the 1st, 2024. Ramaphosa said that the BRICS had begun a new chapter in the efforts to bring about a world order that is fair, inclusive, and prosperous. Dr. Amany, actually reading this statement, and I know that you have joined this important forum, and we're really happy that Egypt had joined the BRICS. Definitely, this is going to be reflecting positively on our relations with the member countries, also offering further investment opportunities. So first of all, reading Ramaphosa's statement at the press conference.
So, of course, that was a very important summit, and it was actually preceded also by the BRICS Business Forum that I was chairing as the president of the Africa Business Council. So the Africa Business Council with the BRICS Business Council are looking forward, just as President Ramaphosa said, a prosperous Africa. Because that's our Africa 23 development agenda, actually, a prosperous, peaceful, integrated Africa driven by the citizens of Africa. So how are we going really to achieve the prosperity of the continent? And that's why Ramaphosa said this step towards the BRICS is very important towards creating wealth of the continent. And that's what really we are. And having an economic bloc which can be really cooperative, promote investment among ourselves, and to be a real bloc away from superpowers that are sometimes monopolizing or away from the control of certain currencies of the world. So this is actually creates a huge opportunity for our African continent to realize our the Africa we want. And also for Egypt, being Egypt a member country of African Union, but also now member of the BRICS.
Yes, Egypt being the member of the BRICS, how far, in your opinion, would this give a global voice for Africa? Actually, it's a very important step. Egypt is looking forward to cooperation and a sense of coordination with the BRICS countries. How do you see the future of Egypt-BRICS countries' cooperation?
So this is very important because it really depends on how are we going our economic cooperation, because this is a base actually of the whole BRICS summit. And during our business forum of the BRICS Business Council, I was at the opening panel, and we just highlighted how our the whole membership of Africa and the whole collaboration of African countries with BRICS, and we came to an understanding that Africa is 1.3 billion people. It's 27% of the population of the world. The BRICS countries are actually constituting 3.7 billion people, which is about 43% of the whole population of the world. So together, we constitute 60% of the whole population of the world. It's a huge, huge, huge bloc that can really shape the whole world.
Yeah.
So with this, how can we really make our cooperation based on, I'm always saying them, three pillars. First, how are we collaborate with reference to the investment from the BRICS countries to Africa based on transfer of technology, creation of jobs, value addition for our African raw materials, and opening new markets for our African products into the BRICS countries.
Yes.
And that's one of the major issues, actually, of opening markets to our African products.
Yes, opening markets to our African brothers and further investment opportunities between Egypt and the BRICS members. What sort of doors, in your opinion, that we need to knock? I'm sure that there will be like more unconventional doors opening.
So our actual discussion during the business forum, we based on the vision of our Africa Business Council, which is a competitive, borderless, innovative Africa for trade, investment, and industrialization. So in doing this, I have mapped it with 3 pillars. The first, 3 pillars, which is private sector strengthening, including SMEs, women and youth. And that's actually got a lot of discussion during our meeting, which is really about building capacity of the private sector, strengthening them, giving them information, awareness, education. And the second pillar is about policy advocacy. We need an enabling environment for investment within the continent. We need to see how we have a conducive environment for investment, reduced corporate taxes. So there is a lot of reforms that we need to do really to make this. And the third really pillar is about an African product, a made in Africa product, which is competitive, value added, that is standardized, harmonized, and this could come from the investment of the BRIC countries within the continent and in Egypt, under the umbrella of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area now, which is a huge single market of 1.3 billion people. Is a huge market. So if BRICS countries invest in Africa, in Egypt or any African countries, they will have the opportunity to export their products to the whole members of the African Union under the umbrella of ACFTA, which gives a huge market of 1.3 billion people without customs, without any challenges, and it will actually help Africa to add value to its raw materials and resources.
Yes. We are actually describing the planned expansion of the BRICS bloc in a significant shift in the geopolitical landscape. This is what analysts said. The BRICS Africa dialogue meeting that was held in Johannesburg is a step actually placing Africa in its rightful position in the global order. And we have been like moving forward in order to achieve this step. What sort of pluses this is going to add to Africa? And the BRICS Africa dialogue, if we like can quote, what sort of pluses, what sort of impact, what sort of successes are we expecting?
Sorry. So this is very important because, as we mentioned, of 60% of the whole population of the world coming together is a huge potential towards shaping the new world superpowers.
Yes.
And the investment of the BRICS within the continent will really make a huge plus and a huge prosperity within the African continent. Because for instance, if we're talking about our business sector, how we make a mapping exercise of what natural resources is on the continent, and how we add value to these natural resources, and how we invest in infrastructure, which is huge, and in energy to do industrialization. So this if we have transfer of technology from the BRICS countries within the continent, and we add value to the products which is in the continent, and we have BRICS countries opening their markets plus Africa under ACFTA, it's a huge plus. And as I always say, some of our African leaders say alleviation of poverty, and we disagree with them. We say creation of wealth. So how to create wealth, and how we can really overcome the shocks that happen to Africa and the whole world, and the crisis, whether with COVID or the wars that's happening, or even the instability that's happening on the continent because of poverty, because of illiteracy, because of many challenges within the whole system and ecosystem. So if we put the basis of how the BRICS collaboration with Africa could really based on this creation of wealth and on this transfer of technology and of really no exploitation for our raw materials, because this is what we need as Africa.
Yes, what we need as Africa and what we need as Africans, and this is actually a great platform where we are going to see also a plus concerning discussing the reform process in Africa, discussing sustainability, sustainable development in the continent. Namely those pillars, and the private sector also many hands-on. Dr. Asfour, at the opening session of the BRICS Business Council Forum, you have stated and indicated that there are many opportunities of cooperation between the private sector and the BRICS countries. What would be those opportunities, and in what way are they going to reshape within the framework of Africa now having a heavy weight in the bloc?
So that's very important, because as Africa Business Council, we are now collaborating to see how we sign an MOU with the BRICS Business Council, based actually on the clusters that we have realized under the Africa Business Council. So we have 20 clusters. How those 20 clusters be geared towards the collaboration with the BRICS. We have energy. How can we invest in renewable energy? Africa harnesses more than 49% of the renewable energy of the world. How we can invest to create this energy for industrialization. We have investment opportunities, so we need to see how the map of the investment opportunities on the continent and allocate those opportunities to our friends and brothers from the BRICS countries, so that, for instance, let us take minerals, for instance, lithium. And now we have Zambia and DRC have already constituted a partnership to see how we invest to industrialize lithium batteries, because by 2030 we will need 200 million, there will be 200 million electrical cars. Who is going to manufacture the batteries for those electrical cars? The raw material is in Africa. Why should Africa export its raw materials and it is industrialized somewhere else on the outside the continent? So this is one of the things, actually, how we invest in the industrialization and into huge projects that will shape the whole world with reference to adding value to the products. For instance, mineral development resources, we have a lot of minerals on the continent. How we invest in order to add value to those mineral development resources. Another issue is agriculture and agribusiness. In Africa, we have 65% of the arable land of the whole world, while we import $80 billion per year. Why? This is a formula that we can now, as private sector, we are always saying, why do we have to import our food if we have 65% of arable land? So how can this partnership really add value again to our agriculture products for agribusiness and agro-processing? Right now, for instance, macadamia goes to Vietnam to be roasted there and then sold to the whole world. Why isn't it roasted on the continent? For instance, in many African countries, we have cattle, but they import milk from outside the continent. Another issue about leather industry. We have a lot of cattle, but again, they export the leather outside the continent, and then we again buy it from outside after value addition. So the huge opportunities of this mapping exercise of whether agriculture, agribusiness, energy, investment, fashion design, for instance, that's one thing. Again, this is another cluster. You know, for instance, Bangladesh is one of the most exporting for apparel and garment and textile, while in Africa we have all the natural resources and even the skilled labor. Like Egypt, we have a huge potential and scientific expertise of exporting to our sisters and brothers on the continent to invest in garment and textile and to see how we open new horizons for this across the whole world. So this is a huge opportunity to open the whole 3.7 billion people, another market that Africa could really tap in, but by adding the science and technology and industrialization to all our potential within the continent, that I believe will be a huge partnership.
Definitely. The African Business Council was established within the framework of activating the continental free trade area and also of increasing the intra-trade actually between the countries of Africa. So definitely we have a very important role played by the African Business Council in order to support the private sector in the continent.
Yes, Africa Business Council established in line with the Heads of State Summit to be the voice of the private sector, to increase our intra-Africa trade, to fast-track the implementation of the ACFTA. Right now, our intra-Africa trade is 16% only. So this is actually is not matching with 1.3 billion people and all of our really working together. So right yesterday we had a big workshop on the role of private sector in the implementation of ACFTA that was attended by all the stakeholders from here to make awareness for the private sector. What are the potential of the ECFTA? How can you trade under and export under the ECFTA? Because the ECFTA is our flagship program for the African continent. Now, how you implement it, that is very important. Again, doing that, we have to work together for the, I call it the triad of empowerment, again, to build the capacity of our private sector. Like, for instance, yesterday we had a big gathering of our Egyptian private sector, but they were not aware of what the potentials of the ACFTA. We had to, there was intervention from ACFTA Secretariat that talked about the guided trade initiative, how we trade under the ACFTA, and how we had with us also the General Authority of Export and Import, we had the customs authorities, we had the Afri-Exim Bank, we had the ACFTA Secretariat, building capacity of the private sector. But one issue, the second pillar with policy advocacy that I am pushing personally, and our team with the Africa Business Council, is the policy.
Yeah.
We need, and what I'm pushing is about government procurement. How can we have, I'm pushing to have at least 40% of all government procurement on the continent goes to African private sector. When you have something, and I always say, if we have a product on the African soil, we should not bring it from outside the African soil. And we have, when we have a raw material, we need to add value to it, so in order to have it. So if we have a tender for construction, and we have, for instance, construction companies on the continent, why I bring it from outside the continent? You see? So it's a huge important to see how, what is the expertise on the continent. So you need a business directory, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We need to have expertise within the continent. You need to have a database for what's existing on the continent. So when you have a project, you need to refer it to those expertise on the continent. Or if you have a product that is already on the continent, for instance, in Egypt, I always say here, there is about 165 pharmaceutical industry. And still we are importing from outside the continent. 400 medical consumer supplies factories we are bringing outside of the continent. Construction material, nobody is knowing about it. But again, for instance, we have in Kenya, we have tea. Ethiopia, we have coffee. In Ghana, we have cocoa. Why do bring it from outside the continent?
Yes.
So it's really about increasing our intra-Africa trade. It's about building partnership. It's about trade missions. It's about knowing about ourselves. That's why within this, we will be hosting, inshallah, the COMESA Trade Fair in Egypt here from 8 to 11 of October. And of course, the Intra-Africa Trade Fair that is already will be in Egypt, hosted in November from 9 to 15, which is also, again, another opportunity for increasing our intra-Africa trade and building partnership and business linkages.
Definitely building partnership and business linkages. And let me, like in a flashback, it was a very important year, actually, the Egyptian chairmanship of the African Union. We're actually reaping the fruit of the strong sense of foundation and the linkage, as you've said, Dr. Asfour. A very successful year for Egypt. Definitely the repercussions were felt later. And you're dealing with many representatives of the African countries, and in your capacity also as the president of the African Business Council. How do you see this important step forward, and how are the opportunities that are now set on the table between Egypt and the African countries, building on the foundation of the achievements undertaken during the African Union chairmanship?
So during the African Union chairmanship under the presidency of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, he was really focusing on infrastructure, which is crucial for any development of any country or any continent. Infrastructure is the cornerstone of any starting of business, starting of industrialization, manufacturing, roads. How we have from Cairo to Cape, how we have from Mombasa from Lagos to Mombasa. The lack of infrastructure is costing Africa huge, because the cost of the transfer of products is huge. It is really adding up to the cost of the products, and so it cannot be competitive. That's why the chairmanship of Egypt to African Union was huge. Also, the ACFTA was launched under the presidency of African Union, of Egypt or African Union. And it is very important to know that if we really invest in infrastructure, whether this infrastructure, roads, maritime, aviation industry, railways, trucks, you know, it will really make a huge difference within the African continent to see how we can increase our intra-Africa trade. And this put the cornerstone actually of how we are, how our relation as Egypt with African continent, it's always there, but we need to see how we can make more relation with reference to the investment on the continent and the business linkages within the continent. Of course, we can see the Tanzania Dam, which is built again by Egyptian companies, but we need to add more to this. So within the clusters of Africa Business Council, we have the infrastructure cluster that we're looking forward also how we can support on the continent. We have, as I mentioned, the energy, we have investment, we have all the tools that we can promote our partnership, but also build partnership and business linkages. Because as I mentioned, for instance, now Africa Business Council is under the agriculture, agribusiness with African Union. We are having a huge, and Afri-Exim we have a huge program called CAPS, which is Common Agro-Industrial Parks. Egypt has a huge expertise within the agro-industrial parks, within the whole irrigation systems, within the agriculture, agribusiness. So how are we supporting with reference to this? Yes. So how we train and make capacity building. So there is huge potentials, of course, and I believe that our role as Africa Business Council to see and map what is present on the continent and how we add value and how we make this expertise and make this business matchmaking program, just like we did with the BRICS during our presence in Johannesburg.
Yes, well, definitely many pluses, and if we're going to talk about the challenges and the changes, we have, of course, a technological revolution that is going out throughout the whole world. The whole world is talking about the current world order that is engulfed actually with ascending political polarization that is affecting actually and having a different impact on international cooperation. We are talking also among the priorities now for Africa, technology transfer. So how far is this also important point on the agenda, in your opinion?
Actually, this is very important because technology transfer is a huge component that we were talking about it with BRICS.
Yeah.
That how we are really working together for transfer of technology from the BRICS countries to the continent, because without science and technology, there is no way to go. Yeah. And actually, the next year, EU summit will be about education and science and technology. And we are going to organize a big conference about African Congress for Science, Technology, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship and Industrialization. So again, during the African Union summit in Kenya, that was just concluded in Kenya, we had the African Union Private Sector Forum, and we had recommendations. And those recommendations are establishment of three funds. Innovate Africa Fund, how we really have support to the young startups of the continent and have this fund to support the innovation and the digitalization for the youth startups. And another one is about medical technology fund, which is about how you really work on the also on the health sector. We're under the health cluster of Africa Business Council to promote the transfer of technology within the whole health system on the continent, because it is huge importance also the well-being of our people of the continent. So it is digitalization and innovation is another issue which you cannot develop without it. So you have to invest in digitalization. Again, for instance, if we're talking about digital economy. We have to promote e-commerce. We have to promote among ourselves all the digital era and to support our youth and women and SMEs for the digitalization of the continent. And another issue with reference even to digital economy, and again for the financial system, you know, that to get out of the superpowers polarization for the currencies, we need to have our own payment system. And that's why also, again, Afri-Exim Bank, which is PEPS, which is the Pan-African Payment Settlement System, is doing so that we are going out of the dollarization and to have, for instance, Egyptian, we can pay with Egyptian pound, and Nigeria can pay with the Naira, the Rand by South Africa, or the CFA with West Africa. So we can use our own currencies alongside the platforms that is done for the payment systems. So we need innovative ideas, and we need to see how we have digitalizing all our economy so that we are able to leapfrog and to create the real development within the continent.
Yes, leaping frog and creating our sense of leadership in the continent. What does it take, and how can we support, actually, how can this membership support the Egyptian leadership in the continent? What sort of doors and benefits will it open, in your opinion, Dr. Asfour?
Actually, the role of the private sector is huge within the development. So what is really needed is to see how the leadership support the role of the private sector in the implementation of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, because this is #1 flag to realize the Africa we want. How we can have real reforms, decrease the corporate taxes, you know, have a conducive environment for the investment, an enabling environment for investment, a one-stop shop for private sector to come and from any partners to come and say, okay, we want to invest, this is how it goes. One-stop shop, internal reforms for the policies. We need a real revolution with reference to the policies that is attracting investment. If you want to attract investment from outside the continent, and with this BRICS partnership, but also again based on creation of jobs and value addition. It's not about investment that comes for exploitation of our continent, but it is something that's a win-win situation. And that's actually, whenever we talk about, as Africa Business Council, we say it's the partnership of equals, it's partnership based on win-win situation, and the partnership that is based on the creation of jobs of our continent and the creation of wealth.
Yes. Well, there are lots of efforts on behalf of Egypt in creating an environment that is actually conducive to further fostering economic integration and economic inclusion in the continent, increasing intra-regional media and trade and investments. How are we going to work on that? What does that reflect, in your opinion?
Well, in my opinion, it reflects a huge shift towards, and I always say, our Africans always say we want Africa free from hunger, free from disease. No, they want Africa free from hunger, free from disease, free from illiteracy, free from poverty. And we say, no, as a private sector, we need Africa not free from hunger, but well nourished, not free from disease, but healthy, not free from poverty, but wealthy, not free from illiteracy, but well educated. So this is the real Africa we want. So our aspiration actually for the Africa we want is to be, as we always say, a prosperous, integrated Africa. Look at what's happening across the continent with all the disabilities and the political disabilities, the terrorism, all the things that's happening. Actually, peace and security is very much inversely proportional to the wealth of the continent. If the youth of the continent have jobs and decent shops, they have economic empowerment, they have all their basic needs, they are not really in need, so they will not go and just be in terrorism, you see? Our youth, we need to empower our youth. 60% of our African population is youth under 25 years.
Yes, let us invest actually in the youth. They are the future, they are our treasure, as we are definitely doing here in Egypt under the leadership of President Sisi. We're talking Africa without borders also. This means a sense of innovation. It means also a high sense of competitiveness for trade, for investment and industry. There are many mechanisms that are going to be applied in order to make no country left behind. So a final word in that, your expectations from the eyes of the President of the Africa Business Council, how do you see the future?
Well, I'm always optimistic about the future, but I believe that we have all to work together in partnership. The government, the private sector, the academia, everybody, we have to have a roadmap for our partnership, a roadmap for the Africa we want. How is each partner going to perform? But as I always say, this is my final 10 ins. I always say internal policy reforms, indigenous capacity building for our people, information sharing, we need to have information, infrastructure, industrialization, innovation and scientific research and technology, institutional strengthening, intergenerational dialogue and bringing youth together, of course, integrity and integration. So if we really integrate among ourselves, empower our people of Africa, put a roadmap for our development, then we will realize the Africa we want.
Definitely, we're looking forward to realizing the Africa that we aspire. And I thank you so much, Professor Dr. Amany Asfour, President of the Africa Business Council, for joining us here exclusively on Nile TV International, just right after your arrival from that important forum that brought also Egypt to the BRICS. We are definitely looking to a brighter future. Thank you so much, Dr. Amany.
My pleasure. It was my real pleasure. Thank you very much for Daily Debate and Nile TV.
Thank you. And I thank you, dear viewers, for joining us. That was the Daily Debate tonight, and I'm Taghreed Hussein. Many thanks for watching.